I want you to because of your expertise, because Eli was the first one to say that. Who was on the water tower? Where was the perimeter? Who tried to put that whole game together? And we found from our first panel today, there was very little coordination. They couldn't talk to each other. They didn't have the ability to communicate. So from the standpoint that you've all been in and looking at where we are, and so everybody understands this as I look at this. This is the AGR building. The water tower is right here. The president was down here. So where should the perimeter have been? Because apparently they thought it was here. That's what was set up, because we had people in this area. We didn't have anybody back here, not from Secret Service. We did have private law enforcement. This whole area was under construction. There was no easy way in or easy way out of this site. On that day, everything that could go wrong apparently went wrong.
Mr. Chairman, I'll tell you that any counter sniper, or anyone from the military can tell you that the high ground and the highest vantage point is where you want to be. The thing that Eli and I had talked about, Representative Crane, when we looked at the water tower, we actually walked over and tried to view whether or not it was even accessible to begin with. But what I had also noticed is that right behind the water tower was a very well manicured cut path that goes through the woods all the way down to the intersection that intersects between where the entrance to the fairground was and the AGR building's main street. Very permissible, without any magnetometers or any of the actual capabilities of security that would have actually allowed someone to go in there basically unfettered. In my personal opinion, when you establish a perimeter, you look at what actual risks exist. The Kubota dealership is obviously somewhere that I would have actually had someone stationed to ensure they couldn't access the building. The AGR building would have been a vantage point that I would certainly have looked at 150 yards. Also, to the 9 o'clock of the stage, there was a tremendous amount of multiple buildings and structures who also had a vantage point, direct line of sight to the stage itself. But you would have essentially have looked at what are the actual capabilities of a professional shooter. And I want to echo one thing, if I may, Mr. Chairman, by Representative Crane. When we talk about the fact that not even the risk of an actual trained sniper or someone who has an understanding of long-range distance shooting, but an actual assault team who could have very easily, that fence line that you're pointing at for the AGR building is approximately 100 yards direct line of sight to the stage with no blockage in either the visual or any additional security with an actual screening or anything like that. So you could have had a guy walk up, or a team of individuals, with a bag with an assault rifle or other capabilities who could have easily come to that line, and Eli and I have discussed this with also Eric Prince. They could have basically done a 5-man, 7-man, 10-man line right there to have opened fire with assault weapons and created a kill box right there on top of that stage. And you're talking 100 yards. That's what most people utilize as their original dope, which is their original 0 for their rifles. So very capable for almost any rifle, and you actually have some special operations teams who do very well with a pistol at even 100. So the fact is that all of the AGR building should have been secured. They should have had full-time watch on that road that leads into the AGR building, which, as you know, comes into the main area and then loops around to a back parking lot. I would have had a law enforcement officer, a Secret Service agent, checking every single person who was parking there to ensure that they were an employee of AGR and not like the white van or others who were able to be permitted into there with complete access, not knowing what was capable. But also, let's note one thing that we haven't mentioned here, which is the sophisticated explosive devices that was also found. This is what also Representative Crane and I talked about was problematic, because even some of the EOD teams talked about the sophistication of this device, which makes me also look further into the fact that Thomas Crooks was not acting alone. And a multi-channel detonator or transmitter is a pretty sophisticated thing that you don't just go ahead and find online. So there's more that needs to be uncovered, but I would tell you without unequivocally, and I'll let my colleague also determine whether he feels the same, the entire AGR perimeter, a positioning at the Kubota dealership to the 12 o'clock of the stage, as well as for the outlying buildings to the 9 o'clock of the stage, which were multiple buildings, should have all been covered and should have all have ensured that there was no advantage point to get to the president for line of sight.
Mr. Crane, any additional?
Yeah, Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think one of the things that I said in my opening statement needs to be said again. When you look at this site and all the threat profiles that surround this site, sir, I don't think the event should have ever been held there. There's just way too many buildings, rooftops, windows, trees that a potential assassin could have posted themselves up in. So I think that's number one. As far as when you talk about some of your more conventional assassination attempts with long-range rifles, most of your snipers, counter-snipers who have any legitimate training whatsoever are more than capable out far past 1,000 yards. But let's just say we put that perimeter at 1,000 yards. That's one thing to consider. But the other thing I think that's important to point out, sir, is that modern warfare has changed dramatically, and we need to look no further than some of the warfare going on with Ukraine and Russia right now. One of the biggest threats to the president, and this is why I keep talking about the fact that nobody that has attempted to assassinate the president has been a professional. But with drone warfare, sir, attacks could be launched at any president, any candidate from miles away. And if we can't stop a 20-year-old kid with no military experience who gets within 150 yards of the president with an AR-15 and then gets off several shots at the president, I have very little faith that we'd be able to stop a coordinated drone attack along with assault teams and snipers. And so that's one of the things that I want to continue to harp on. One of the things Dan Bongino told us, Mr. Chairman, is that the Secret Service, while he was there, was allergic to innovation. They were allergic to, any attempt to keep, their security systems appropriate and relative to the threats that modern warfare present. Dan Bongino even said that it took them decades, sir, to even start using slings on their primary weapons. Anybody who's ever, been in law enforcement on a SWAT team or in the military that has a primary and a secondary weapon knows that if you don't have a sling, sir, and you have to transition to your secondary weapon, what are you going to do with that gun? You're just going to throw it on the ground or give it to somebody? What if you have to climb a ladder? What if you have to do prisoner handling? And so if it took the Secret Service decades to even implement such basic, gear transformations, it's very concerning that they're going to be able to handle some of these modern threats that are now very likely as modern warfare has adapted.
No, thank you. I'm aware of this whole area for trying to figure out where I am in life. About 60-some years, I know this area. As you just pointed out, and we've talked about before, one of my main concerns when I found out this was going to be the place, I said, this is going to be almost impossible for safety and security.
Are there other things in particular areas of inquiry that you want to see this committee utilizing going forward, particular witnesses you think that we should have? Any thoughts you have about what and whom we should be bringing in to testify?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've seen online, and let me be clear when I say this, guys, so much of any investigation, I think, needs to be open-minded and willing to look at anything and everything, that even if it might be outside the official narrative. Even if you talk to somebody and find out that the evidence that they're presenting, might not hold water, might lack credibility, I think that's extremely important. One of the videos that I've seen online is from a gentleman named John Colin, who talks about the possibility of a second shooter, and he shows a video, Miss Lee, where in this video he shows a bullet traveling down a path and the disruption that round supposedly makes, and then flies into one of the stadium fence railings. That shows that it would have been very, very difficult for that round to travel the path that it did had it come from Thomas Crooks. I think that you need to bring this gentleman in, see his evidence, and if you don't think it holds water, then you need to make that assessment. But that was one of the things I said in my opening testimony. Far too often, especially as representatives, we're scared that if we investigate something that others are saying might be conspiratorial, then that might defame us or give us a lack of credibility. But I think any investigation out there that's worth its salt will look at any theory and then try and disprove, debunk it, or see if it holds water and run with it. So John Cullen is somebody I think you guys should bring in here and look at the video evidence that he has of a bullet traveling, in a trajectory and a path that would not have been able to come from Thomas Crooks.
And I'd like to just echo this. The one thing that doesn't lie is bullet trajectory and also the coefficients that it carries. And I think that Eli and I had talked about this prior to the hearing, but also multiple times about John Cullen's video that does show, if you look at people who were injured and the actual line of sight and where it was to the stage, just kind of what the possibilities were and how many shots were truly taken. The other thing that I would like us to continue to look at within this committee is that what are the overall, while we can try and talk about threat analysis, what are the things, and as Representative Crane had pointed out, even drone capabilities, knowing how sophisticated things have gotten, what are we missing with regards to risk management and mitigation strategies that exist now that didn't exist 20, 30 years ago, where they've not updated their training platform and portfolio to incorporate? What type of counter-drone capabilities do we have? What do we have as far as an understanding of what types of things we can enact immediately to try and get an improvement upon perimeter security layouts? And also even our communication capabilities. We found that even the counter-snipers were utilizing text messaging as one of the means of communication, knowing that, Eli and I can tell you, you have to come off the rifle or come off the scope if you're a spotter in order to try and text someone information and details. When they tried to say that we may not have had any type of good Wi-Fi or comms or internet, the Starlink system that we utilize in Ukraine and other areas has been proven to be something that can not only be set up immediately, but could be utilized and incorporated into the team's overall equipments. And so I think that, as Eli Crane talked about, as Dan Bongino's talked about, a lack of willingness of the Secret Service to evolve to the incoming threats, a lack of willingness to have new equipment that is the most modern, updated, and efficient, I think is going to lead to further attacks. But we also have to start looking at the adversarial challenges when it comes to Iran, who, as you know, the Ayatollah himself recently just posted a video that was alluding to the fact that they want to try another assassination, saying that revenge is imminent, even showing the Mar-a-Lago estates and the president playing golf. We need to take these threats very seriously, especially when we look at things like Mershan, who's the 46-year-old Pakistani who flew to Iran for a series of days, then to Houston, Texas, was stopped in Houston, Texas, and questioned by the FBI. And again, this is something I would ask the committee, and I know the FBI has been stonewalling and preventing information, but potentially subpoena and possible contempt. We have to acknowledge the fact, what was the actual answers that this individual provided, knowing he was already on a terrorist watch list, knowing that he just came from Iran, that would allow him to be permitted to enter into the United States and then found with a plot to not only assassinate the president, but also 35 other elected officials. I think that this is really getting to the crux of the fact that we don't have the security, and there's a false sense of security that's been developed at this point.